said, you know what? Why don't I do this? Why don't I focus on the things about Silicon Valley that folks in any geography can actually apply? So that's what I've got today. The fundamental fact is you can't replicate Silicon Valley. A lot of people like to. I went in and I started writing in Silicon Valley of, and as you can see, as far as I can tell, every single possible geography wants to have its own Silicon Valley.
It's surprising to me how many people want to raise venture capital but don't actually understand how the venture capital business works. And you know, if you're looking at yet another sales call, it's important to understand, like, well, who's your client, right? Like, what are their motivations? What are they looking to do? You know, what are the things they're going to look for in working with you as relevant to their business?
It seems like everybody's been traveling a little bit recently, and you know, is looking internationally now more so than ever. It's not just Silicon Valley. So I'm wondering, you know, in the last couple of years, have you seen interest around the world sort of pick up in entrepreneurship? You know, can we export this Silicon Valley ethos to other parts of the world? What do you think?
We had trouble exporting it to Boston. Okay, 128 has been dying for this. Montana has been dying for this, and these different valleys have been created all over the United States, and London was desperate to try to do this.
Silicon Roundabout? Yeah.
I mean, and it's so desired. But it's an interesting chemistry and ecosystem, as you discussed this morning, to try to replicate it.
Why angel investing, and my slogan really should be just don't do it, because if you really think about the amount of energy, time, money that you need to allocate to angel investing, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for very many people. And so the only real reason to do angel investing is because you can't help yourself, and because you just have a passion for entrepreneurship.
Have you all heard about the pay it forward culture? Anybody know about this? Well, you're seeing part of it. So pay it forward was just, you kind of owe a social debt to the people who helped you when you were young. It's now your turn to give back, and there's no requirement to do that. It's what you saw people who were in positions of power when you were young. In fact, the most famous photograph is a very young Steve Jobs, before he did Apple, with hair down to his shoulders, sitting with the head of Intel, who he found in the phone book. And the head of Intel kind of thought this kid was crazy but interesting, and became his mentor for 15 years without particularly asking for anything.
If you love innovation and at the end of the day you want to be in the ecosystem, there's all kinds of ways to do it, and this is one, and it doesn't have to be exclusive. It can really complement a lot of other things you do, including being an entrepreneur yourself. So I just summed up my presentation.
In every one of your communities, you've got tons of innovation. I mean, what I've discovered going around the world, there are plenty of innovators. You know, there are plenty of people who want to be entrepreneurs. They may not know exactly what it means, and they don't have the resources to do it. And you can't wait for the government to figure it out, because they probably won't figure it out. But the angel communities are the highest leverage opportunity for each of you to help develop this entrepreneurial ecosystem. Okay. Because you're not going to get VC funds coming in. I mean, and obviously Silicon Valley didn't start with VC funds. It started with angels, right? And so...
Started with a university.
I mean, there's, you know, so you have this cauldron, right, that you're mixing up. You've got universities, right? You've got entrepreneurs, you've got innovation, and you've got money. You know, and in every one of your regions, there's plenty of money, right? It's a matter of shaking it loose. And the challenge in the United States as well, in every other community, is they'd much rather invest in real estate than in startup companies, right? Or whatever it is, you know, pick whatever it is. You know, the money wants to invest in other things. The cool thing about you guys is you're marshaling that thin layer of people who are willing to put at least some of their money into innovation. And so you are, I think, the biggest forces for change and development of the ecosystems in each of your communities. It's by marshaling an angel network and then supporting the entrepreneurs and then lobbying, you know, sort of the big money and the government. you're right at the center, I think.
So those were my big four: cloud, social, mobile, and big data. Those are very much, right, the big forces that we're kind of seeing in this landscape that have really triggered a whole new tech revolution broadly across the entire landscape. Then there's a couple of other ones that sometimes come up. Open source is really, a big trend in terms of the use of open source and open source as a business model. And another one that's kind of coupled to social, kind of coupled to open source is this idea of consumerization and democratization.
As you know, very few early stage investments end up making it to the end. So in my opinion, you might as well invest in things that you also enjoy being a part of. At an early stage, a lot of what a CEO needs, certainly there's money, but in the ideal situation, as an early stage CEO, you would like to choose who your investors are. And you would like those investors to bring something to the table other than their money that is helpful for you in growing your company.
I want them to understand from the very beginning that there's only one way out. And for me anyway, right? Well, actually the two ways out. You can go out of business. But if we're going to have an exit, for me, it means that you accomplish something amazing. So the people who I'm going to be the first investor into, I want to make sure, because we're at such strong disadvantages for success, that they have all the various ingredients needed in order to maybe be successful.
And, we have a very international crew here, so I want to keep this interactive too, and get your thoughts as we move through this presentation. But the concept is that there's, Silicon Valley no longer has a monopoly on innovation, and I mean it never really did, but now we have connectivity and the ability to find startups, all over the world. That are addressing not only local markets, but can access markets beyond their borders. So I think this is a very exciting time to be investing, and I personally would like to see more diversity, amongst investors, more global outlook, and that's one of the reasons that I'm starting this fund.
Investing is a whole spectrum of things, from what Jeff does, which is micro investing, to small funds, which are, the $50 to $100 million, to big funds like us. And the dynamics are different. What we're looking for is different. The way we work is completely different.
The way I think about investment here in the US, particularly in Silicon Valley, is that your company has to be at the edge of innovation or the state of art for you to be able to credibly go to angel investor or VCs and say that we have something that could create an impact. What I find is a lot of international team has great ideas, really high talent, but they may not be at the edge of innovation, where their ideas are ready to strike a new market and really open up a new opportunity. So I think the best help that you running an accelerator in Ukraine can provide is to get them exposed to Silicon Valley, as well as not just to pitch ideas and get funding, but exposure to entrepreneurial ecosystem, exposure to experts, VCs, angels, to understand where they are investing. If they are too far in and not at the edge, they will never get funding.
We look for building syndicates with strong local partners on the ground. So anytime we're doing a deal where we're not necessarily down the street, we try to find local investors, whether it's an angel or another micro VC, who we know is going to be a little bit closer. And we think that's very helpful to not only ourselves as investors not being next door, but also to the founders themselves.